tutorial we're going to make a salad bowl, a very simple method of rolling out a slab and then fitting it into a bowl that you already have in your home. If you don't have a ceramic bowl, it doesn't matter, you can just get a plastic bowl, any kind of bowl, and put a bit of cling wrap or thin plastic on the inside to stop it from sticking, and then drape your bowl inside that. So it can be a more open bowl, deeper bowl. It's just a little bit more complex fitting the slab into a deeper bowl, but I'll show you how to cut the sides so that you can overlap it to fit it into a deeper bowl. So then you're going to play with patterns on the inside of your bowl using texture from lace or stamps or plants from the garden. And then you can emphasize that texture with oxides. So I just want to say, have fun and enjoy and relax, and I'll see you during this process. Wet your clay very well, then make it into a ball and flatten it down and throw it like a pizza until it's a little bit thicker than 6 millimeters. Then you can roll it with your guides on either side with a cloth over it and below it. Smooth and compress the top surface of your slab with a credit card, and then place the cloth back over it, and by holding it on both sides and holding the cloth, you can transfer the cloth and the slab to another work surface and flip it over so that you can compress the other side of the slab. Once your clay is centered in your bowl, you need to press it in to make it the shape of the bowl. But if you press above the surface that has got nothing below it, you'll stretch the clay on the other side and make it weaker and thinner. So you have to ease it in from the bottom up towards the top by lifting the top section and then feeding the clay in from the bottom upward. Then you can ease the folds in very carefully so that the clay lies completely flat inside the former that you're using. Mark the overlap with a light mark, don't cut deeply there, and then fold back the area where it's double and give yourself about 1 centimeter for an overlap in the join. And because the clay is still so wet and tacky, we don't need to scratch and slip as we're going to press it down very hard. But make sure you only press hard where the clay is double, otherwise you'll have thinner clay on either side of that join. It needs to be well pressed, well joined, so that on the underside, when we take the bowl out of its former, there's not too much of a seam showing, and it will be very easy to hide that seam. If your slab fits your bowl perfectly, you can just run a knife around the edge, pressing against the former that you're using. But if your clay doesn't fit your former, you have to cut it in a parallel line just below the surface. So you do that as I'm doing there, just holding the knife straight and trying to keep it an equal distance from the rim all the way around. It's important to get the rim nice and even, because when you turn it upside down, it will be evenly supported. Then all your scraps you take and dip in some water, shake the excess water off, leave it wrapped in plastic, and within an hour you can wedge it up and reuse it for your foot rings and your other rims and whatever else you want to use it for. So whichever texture you decide to use for your decoration, you compress it in with a smooth stone or the back of a spoon, and always checking that you're not going too deeply into the substrate of your slab, in which case you might create a crack later on. So always check that you don't go more than halfway into your slab, and be careful of making deep impressions right next to the rim, because that might split your rim. When your bowl is nicely leather hard, you will see it has shrunk a little bit away from the bowl, and it's a little bit shorter than it was. And then it's ready to place a board over it and flip it upside down and take it out of its mold. Then you'll see that there are surface textures from the cling wrap that you used to line your bowl, and you need to take that off with a credit card. And also you need to check that seam where we had a join. If it is very visible and there's a bit of a dent there, you need to scratch and slip it and just press a little bit of clay into it and then smooth it over the surface. So spend a bit of time doing this, it's worth it, just to get your surface looking good and professional. Roll a coil on a slightly wet surface, using a slow action with your fingers spread out until it's about as thick as your thumb. Then you can press it down a little bit on both sides and then pick it up on both ends and flop it down. This will flatten and smooth it, almost like making a long thin slab. And then you can tap it down on both sides that way and tap both of the thin edges carefully against the table. If you do this correctly, you'll end up with a nice parallel strip for your foot ring. If it's not parallel after this, you can cut it straight. Don't make it too thin because you want enough clay to work the foot ring into the bowl. I always put the foot ring halfway between the center of the bowl and the rim so that it's well supported. The foot ring is necessary because the inside of the bowl that we used as a former was rounded, and therefore it would have been a rocking bowl, and if we had pressed it down we risked cracking the edges. So I've always recommended putting a foot ring because it also makes your bowl look lifted up and lighter, and gives it a certain grace. So to mark the ring where the foot ring is going to go, a clever technique is to use the back of a clothes peg, because that gives you a parallel line to scratch within. Then you scratch the bowl and you scratch the edge of the thin edge of your rim, and put slip on both of them. Overlap your ring and cut it at an angle, then scratch and slip both ends and join them well together. Then you need to press your foot ring down onto the bowl, holding your fingers like a little beak so that it stays a little bit fatter just where it joins the bowl, so that you've got a little bit of extra clay down there to help with joining it into the bowl. You don't want to make it thinner at that joining surface by taking clay away from it, and then it will be a weak point. So this compression is important. If you find that you have taken away too much clay while you're joining it, you can add another extra little coil into that join and then meld that in until you can't see it anymore. By the way, if you don't have a banding wheel at home, you can take 2 A4 size pieces of paper and put them on top of each other, and your board on top of that, and you'll find that the board will spin very easily around its axis. Place another board on top and tap it down gently, and then check that it's still lying flat by holding your finger and spinning it. If you see any high points, then tap it down at that point. If at that stage when you take it off it has distorted your ring, just correct the ring and work on it a little bit more until it's nice and even. Then you can very, very gently flip it over. Should really wait for about half an hour for that foot ring to firm up before you put the weight of the bowl on it, but if you're very careful, you can do it straight away. This is a very enjoyable process, getting your salad bowl up to this point. Now you need to smooth the outside even more. You can use your credit card and a sponge. Just be careful you don't stress your rim, because if you push it out or in too much at this point, you'll get cracks. You can decide if you want to create a bigger rim around the top here by making another coil like you did for the foot ring and scratching and slipping, and then putting a flattened coil or a rounded coil around the top to just define the rim. But I'm happy with mine just as it is. I want to leave it like that. I've already smoothed the outside, I've compressed the rim nicely, and the plan with this kind of textured bowl, whether you've used lace or whether you've used little prints and stamps or anything else, is to highlight this texture and design by either using an oxide once it's bisque fired, or you can use underglaze stains when it's bone dry, but preferably once it's bisque fired, so that you put on the oxide or the underglaze stain, you paint it on, and then you wipe it off with a sponge. If you do want to try that technique when it's bone dry, you can, but then don't use a damp sponge to wipe it off, because then you might ruin some of your texture and wipe it away. So if you want to wipe off the color when it's bone dry, just use a Brillo pad so that it's something dry that's just flaking off the extra color. And if you do use a Brillo pad when it's dry, then you must wear a mask. And I know we've all got masks at this point. So even your normal COVID mask would work, and then you rub it with a Brillo pad. It's one of these, if you're going to do that when it's bone dry. Right, so when you need to transport your bowl to be fired, just be careful that you handle it gently because it's got a fine rim and a fine foot ring. So what I wanted to say is with my one, I'm going to put copper oxide, a wash over all of this, and then a white glaze over that, and then the copper oxide will come out a grass green. If I'd like it to be a more earthy, olivey colour, then I would put a transparent glaze over the copper oxide. So that's still a decision that you can make. Well, I hope you enjoy this process, and I'll see you with the next tutorial.